Hello and welcome to another episode of Road to Open. I'm Dan Prochko with My Pocket Marketing. Really excited for today's conversation. One, because I work remote all the time, but two, because I have experience on both sides, and it's been really cool feeling the difference between them and seeing the benefits and downfalls between them. And now that we're in this environment where we have health reasons to be where we're at, really excited. So we'll get to that in just a quick second. Just want to remind everybody, if you'd like announcements on our future episodes, reminders on links to watch, etc., please head over to mypocketmarketing.com/join. Get subscribed in there. We do have some other new content that's going to start real soon regarding more in the vein of marketing specifically, that really speaks to a lot of my mentality around marketing of don't spend it if you can't track it. So that's it there. Thank you for joining again. And so without further ado, I would love to introduce my guest for today, internal communications expert and founder of Chelsie Fall and Associates, Chelsie Fall. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me.
Definitely. Okay, that's about as scripted as this whole thing gets, Chelsie. Okay, that was really like my radio side coming out there. But I was wondering, for those who don't know you and are tuning in, or going to find this later down the line, share a bit about how you got to where you're at, and then we'll definitely talk about what you do and how you help businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chelsie Fall and Associates, we create communication strategy to bring the workplace together. And that stemmed from experiences that I had in college, gaining an organizational communication degree, and just identifying early on that helping employers improve employee productivity is a necessity and something that is definitely needed. And working in the corporate arena for several years, and looking at the hierarchies and knowing that it takes a team to get a job done for the most part, and bringing everyone together to accomplish common goals was something that I was always passionate about. Look for those opportunities, and working with small business owners, I identified that there was a need for communication and HR strategy within the workplace. And so in 2018, I left my corporate job and started Chelsie Fall and Associates.
Awesome. So what kind of organizations are you working with right now? I understand you don't have to divulge who, et cetera, but you say small business. What size are we talking about?
So our ideal client and the ones that we work with most have 100 employees or less, in the industries of professional services and specialty retail. Working with them to bring the workplace together, and their employees, they typically don't have a communication HR person on staff. And so these are the businesses that are going to have the biggest impact for bringing someone on like myself.
Right. Now, whether or not you're watching and you do or don't have an internal communication expert or HR expert as part of the team, I think you're going to get a lot of value out of today. So we were talking over the last couple of weeks about the interesting environment we're in right now because of COVID. Many organizations their offices just aren't even open right now, and teams are forced to work from home. The funny thing is, through this, and we were joking about it, was that a lot of individuals want to work from home, enjoy working from home. They feel they have less distractions at home. And organizations have actually reported anywhere from 20, and I've read as high as 43% increase in productivity. Is the office broken? It's kind of like my first question here. I've worked all, in both areas, but is the office broken, or is this, and I know, or is this some other element at play?
I think there's a lot to consider here if we're going to talk about the office being broken. Remote work has been discussed for the last decade, and anytime that there has been a huge change in the economy, it has definitely been something that's been explored. And then also with all of the new technology that's coming out, it's more feasible. But when you're really considering if remote work is the right option for your business, there's risk associated with that. And so really doing a risk cost benefit analysis and figuring out, do you have the infrastructure, and does your workload and your infrastructure support remote work? And even outside of just the internal office, how are your vendors and clients working, and what are they expecting from you? So I think really starting there before, is the office broken? Really starting as, does it make sense, number one, for your particular company or organization? And then secondly, looking at
All right, looks like had a bit of a tech issue at the moment. We'll see if Chelsie comes back in a second. Give me one moment. All right, looks like we have Chelsie back. So where we dropped off, my question was a loaded question, just to kind of sync up here. Whether the office is broken, I don't think is really the point. I think where my head is at on this conversation is, like, I've worked in both areas, completely remote, but also in an office. And I think that there is sometimes I don't want to say a distraction, but a lack of alignment when we're not having that face-to-face conversation at the office. It's a cultural issue, and I think that's most of the reason why I've asked to talk with you is, what is it about being remote that makes that so difficult? And or maybe the better question is, what do we keep in mind as our teams are remote that we should be doing on a communication side?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And absolutely, when you're bringing up that face-to-face interaction, and that's so important, and that's what I was going to get to about the office, and making those meaningful connections can only happen face-to-face. This is when you can see nonverbal communication. This is when you can make real eye contact. I mean, I can see your eyes, but I have no clue what you're looking at. Right? And
no, that's been a pet peeve about virtual meetings and conversations, is like, I have to decide, am I looking at the camera so that when you're looking at my face, you can see me looking at you and we're there, or am I looking down at you to pick up on certain facial tics and everything going on? And so even just in this call, there's some cultural issues going on picking up on things. And then as I think about that, extrapolating it to a whole team, that's difficult.
Well, and then again, too, we're talking about distractions in the workplace, in the office. You have distractions at home. It just kind of looks different. And right now is not really a true reflection of how the workplace can operate remotely, because we have all of these other issues like a pandemic taking place where we're having entire families at home, which typically wouldn't be the case. But some of the things to consider is, how are you interacting on these platforms? So for example, working with your team and encouraging participation, like the Zoom platform is the one that I use most often. So encouraging reactions and using the chat rooms and having breakout sessions, and making it a little more visual, like using the screen share, and then encouraging participants to do that as well. And the key to remote work or communication in general is to have clear, specific expectations of what is that going to look like. We're all comfortable at home, so are people allowed to show up? Are they expected to show up in a professional appearance, or can they be a little bit more casual? And those kind of will change the tone of a conversation or the impact that a topic has.
So we're getting down into some areas of policy, and while today the specific policies that companies want to take on and whatnot is really not what our discussion is about. It's more about, so you have some policies and ideas in mind. What is it that we need to communicate? So as teams are at home, I mean, it's not just the meeting itself. I'm glad we talked about that, just now, but there are everything communication from the company vision and where we're going to goal setting, accountability, progress reports, etc. When you look at an organization and their internal communications, and now more importantly than ever, because we're not face to face, we don't have that immediate touch point. What is it that you are advising and recommending organizations put in place?
So it's understanding that you're going to need to have a plan on how your communicating changes. And especially right now with all of the uncertainty, it's really important to have a lot more communication established than in the past. So newsletters, emails, all coming from the decision makers. If they're coming directly from the decision makers, there's less room for interference. And it's showing your teams that, one, you care, you acknowledge what's going on, and you have plans in place. So we're thinking forward thinking here, but also that it's coming directly from you. So this is the situation that is taking place, or this is what we're trying to do.
So how much is too much in that realm? I mean, because look, I know organizations have internal apps, where they are able to communicate out directly with their teams, push notification. But I mean, also, okay, here is an actual podcast from our CEO, and you can just listen in as those get released. I know organizations that use their marketing team, or those platforms at least, whether it be a MailChimp or something similar, to send out an internal communication to the whole team about everything going on. I mean, the tools aside, because those can be applied, across the board, but how often are we talking here? Because what I hear you say is there's the overarching story of the company, the vision, that you always have to tie it back to that. That's what I've heard you say there. How often do we have to do that? Are we talking a daily, an hourly, a monthly?
Dan, it depends on the organization, really, truly. And if you're doing communication audit, and depends on the industry, there's a lot of factors to consider as far as how often. And my advice is to start with more, because you can always take back and gauge the reception of, okay, am I going to give them a little more flexibility, or are they being receptive to this? Do they need this? And the way that you can gauge that is to create feedback programs, and encourage feedback from your team on, is this too much? What do you like to see? And that also creates buy-in for your team. If they have an opportunity to speak to what's happening and feel like they're being part of the change in the planning, with doing communication audits, you'll be able to tell if it's too much or if you need to continue to do more.
So what do you put part of it in audit? Because I agree with you. One of the things I've always talked with our clients, even on a marketing side to customers, communicate more, more often. And there's always pushback, like, oh man, that's too spammy. I don't want to interrupt, or anything down that route. But I mean, what we're doing is providing value. And that's the same thing from leadership down, and from the team up. It's all about driving value. What are some of those elements that we should be looking at if we're going to do an audit? I don't know if maybe you have a tool for that, even, that would help out in that realm.
Well, I also just want to point out too, that because of the uncertainty of the time that we're in, employees are looking for clear direction regularly, more so than has ever been needed, in my opinion. And the main things to look at through the communication audit is what needs to be communicated and who are we communicating to. Yes, you're communicating to your team, but what have they been telling you about, especially in this pandemic, or with any type of organizational change. Are there concerns? What are they excited about? And a lot of that comes from feedback and soliciting it from your team. Our job as decision makers and leaders is to help them feel comfortable, instill trust within our organization and be transparent. And now it's more important than ever.
I think you make a really great point about the uncertainty. I mean, rules in each state or county, even some places, they're changing day to day right now. Okay, am I now expected to come to the office, or am I not expected to? And if I do, am I expected to wear X, and then companies and businesses that are open, right, where teams are coming into the shop, am I expected to wear a hazmat suit, or is it just a mask? I say that a little tongue in cheek, but I know there's some places that require it. But the idea is, what is the policy right now, and then how do we keep that encouragement? But beyond that, you say the feedback piece. That's huge. Are my employees comfortable with where we're at, and or do they understand why and are aligned? How do you get that feedback while making them feel heard?
So having open communication channels, like I was mentioning, an email that says, hey, respond to this email with questions or concerns. One of the easiest ways to do it is a survey. Ideally, you would want to do an interview survey. It's kind of difficult and challenging sometimes depending on how large your team is, but surveys are a great way to gauge feedback within your organization. And being transparent about and clear about what kind of feedback you're looking for.
Is that survey or interview something that you recommend is done by someone as part of the team, a leader, or a third party? Or are there reasons to change that up?
So a third party is going to be ideal because they come in with an unbiased perspective. For example, when we go in, we come in unbiased and talk with employees and the leadership team to ensure that we're bringing it together and uncovering the gaps, and whatever strategy we're implementing, everything is incorporated. But by coming in as unbiased, you're going to get, you typically see the feedback is real because they're a little more comfortable in answering questions.
Cool. So we've got surveys, we're getting the feedback back and forth. We've got some interviews, possibly working with a partner. We're communicating super often. What's next for my organization?
So I think that going forward is that's what you're getting at?
Yeah. I mean, whether or not, maybe I'm not there, maybe I have this plan, or how do I put this plan in place, and how do I evolve it? What are some things that I should be thinking about in that realm?
Well, I think looking at your team as and looking at how they can help in different areas. And so setting up committees and task teams on different aspects. So especially the COVID-19 right now, once you're figuring out where those gaps are and how to best help your team, you'll be able to identify, do we need to be using certain channels, or do we need to up our communication? How often do we need to communicate? What does that look like? And like we had just discussed, sometimes it's more communication, which in this particular time is going to be very beneficial and impactful. But sometimes it's less communication. And what does my team, what do they need from me?
How do I know that? Like, are there metrics or things that I can measure or put in place, or benchmarks I can think about? I know for me, when I work with clients on a marketing side, like you see this statistic right here, or this quote, it's really important to me. So it's like, what is it that I should be looking at, measuring? Is there something that I turn into a temperature gauge? I mean, at least from a leadership level, to understand what's going on. Is it like that, or is it more subjective? Like, just curious to understand.
So when it comes to communication strategy, a lot of it is qualitative data. Okay. And it's a lot of feedback and looking for trends. And then on the HR side, the quantitative piece is there are several different measurements that you can look at: employee engagement, How often is my team responding to the emails that I'm sending out for reception pieces? And it probably kind of aligns with marketing, some of the metrics you may use in marketing as well. But looking at turnover and their employee satisfaction are going to be huge indicators on whether your strategy is effective or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a mix of both, just like in marketing. You get your long form answers, and it's like, okay, that's all real qualitative, but one of the things we do with that is we turn it into quantitative. Do we get the temperature? What's the language used in the responses? Is it mostly negative or is it mostly positive? I know before we jumped on, you were talking about language being really important right now, and I know from that qualitative survey results or from the interviews, that's a lot of what you can glean. How does that mirror at the leadership level in terms of what we should be using right now in terms of language, and how do we evolve that over time?
Yeah, so right now, as I was saying, direct and transparent language is completely important. So, one of the key words here and themes is to be empathetic, and empathy should be rolled out into an organization because there are now more than ever, there are feelings within companies and organizations, and we're seeing that people respond well to that. So regardless of your own beliefs around the topic, and what you think as far as empathy, keywords would be like we, because it's very powerful and showcases unity, followed by sentences like we're in this together, we understand. And then again, forward thinking statements like going forward, we're going to implement this. It's showing that the company and organization is being empathetic, that it's acknowledging something's going on, that it's working hard, that we're working hard together through this pandemic, through this uncertainty. And this is where we think we're headed. And then be open to plans changing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, everything is changing day to day.
Yeah.
I mean, we're up and down. I mean, are we hitting phase 4 or are we going back to phase 2? I don't know. No, for sure. In that, you talked about empathy. Sometimes, this is my experience. In our conversation, I hear some of those things, or I read them, I guess I should say. And sometimes I feel they're just platitudes. What is it about the language, or maybe the program itself, that helps the team really buy in and feel that it is truly empathetic and that it is a team effort? I mean, I think some of these words are very important in helping get there. Is it the full program or something else?
It's authenticity. How authentic is the organization and company being true to their values, true to the culture that they're trying to maintain? And then again, that transparency. Are individuals just saying we to say we, or are they really feeling that we're in this together? You can tell. And again, that looking at that remote work versus the office, that's where you can really feel and see that because of the nonverbal cues.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're kind of talking about is mixed messages, or putting your money where your mouth is. Are you walking the walk or just talking it? You're right. Saying the we and the together doesn't mean it's actually happening. So what are the actions being shown by leadership and the team as a whole that's making it happen? Which is funny because we were just joking. I say joking, but we were really exploring that one quite a bit just before we jumped on, because one of the statistics that some research done right now in this lockdown is that 76% of workers or thereabouts feel like that they have fewer distractions when they're outside of the office. Is trying to think how to word this, but it's like, as a leader, or maybe more as a manager is really the better word, because leader is something a little different, but like as a manager, I want to know the work is getting done. As a leader, I want to make sure my team is all aligned on the same vision. So what does that mean for places where team members have to be in an office, or some are in the office and some are away? It just feels like there's a lot of confusion that can happen in those times.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I'm really.
I know I didn't end it with a question. Yeah, I didn't end it with a question. It was more like, how do we? I mean, so we have this whole program. People in an office are going to see leaders do things. You know, they're going to see actions. They're going to see motion, or even if it's a shop. Those who are remote or doing maybe customer support don't see them do it. All they get to do is read or anything. Are there maybe case studies or organizations or teams, you know, doing things that have kind of helped bridge that gap, or that you've seen make that happen, so that those that are remote are actually seeing the action take place? Or is it really just over communication? And if it is, that's great that it's that simple. Let's just get more out there.
I think you touched on it right there at the end. It's the channels of communication that we're using, because not everybody, you're not going to be able to speak with your whole entire team at one time, if they're in the office or outside of the office, unless you bring them together. And the key is bringing them together to show that the message is the same going out to everybody. So communicating more and effectively would be remote employees and in-office employees coming together on a video call to see that leader. And then, yes, the leader or the manager communicating with everybody in one single email or one newsletter or one conference call, whatever it needs to look like, so that, again, the message is coming from the decision maker directly to the individuals that will be carrying out the strategic plans.
Nice. Okay. Over communicate. Wonderful. Love it. And keep it consistent, but consistency. And I think this is why working with partners like you know, we get so distracted with the work we have to do day to day. How do we keep that consistent down the line? When you're working with organizations, you know, the tools that they use or that you recommend, I mean, are we talking like just an email inbox is enough? Or do we have to have the private intranet with the chat and the forum? Do we have to have that private video, channel, everything going on? Like, what should organizations be looking at to make that communication work back and forth?
Well, definitely technology. I mean, gone are the days of the conference calls. I know I mentioned that, but really seeing each other face to face, because even though we can't be in the office, video is better than a phone call. When we're looking at distractions, I can be distracted on the video, but I'm probably more likely going to be distracted on that phone call. Especially not being within the organization. And I think companies really need to adapt the technology around ways to communicate. So having chat systems where everybody can be on board with a chat system. I can't think of the app right now.
I mean, there's Slack. I mean, if you're on Google, you've got, you know, your Google Hangouts and Meet. If you're on Microsoft, you got Microsoft Teams where you can set all that up, you know. Even Facebook rolled out Facebook Business where they have something that's going on that's only internal to the company. So, yeah.
And implement that within your organization slowly if you're not using it right now, because this is the way that the world is going, is on technology. So it's important to start using it within your organization now, not just because we have to, but because this is where we're going and this is where we have been going.
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast a week ago, and I might have told you this story, but they were talking about, what was it, the 50s or the 60s when Future World was down at like Epcot or Disney, or I forget exactly where. I don't have all of that in my head, but the idea was that when we got to today, right now, that it was going to be flying cars, that it was going to be, nobody had to work, we didn't have money, we were going to take half of our time and be able to pursue hobbies. Now, if you really take a look at that and think about what's going on right now, I kind of think we've almost made it. Aside from the 1980s where the helicopter, you know, the flying car thing didn't work, but we've got what? You've got hovercraft taxis that are trying to do things in New York. We are now working from home. Granted, it's out of necessity, but we have the technology to do it, and people are finding they're more productive. So they actually work less every day, but get the same amount done, meaning they now have half their time to pursue other things, you know? And so it's just really interesting that if we can just communicate and get everybody aligned, we can get more with less time and have everybody move forward in the same direction. It's a really exciting time right now, in my opinion. I really love what's going on.
There's a lot of artificial intelligence that's being created and used to make these chat systems or video platforms seem like real life, like we're in the office working together, where I was reading an article that Apple has some technology that it will alert you if you're not paying attention on a video call. So it really is it's the way of the world, and that's where we're headed.
That's hilarious. So, okay, that's really interesting, because I know I've been on a ton of video calls where people don't want to turn their video on. And you were just talking about, seeing people face to face and everything. And if I'm jumping on a video conference that's got 50 people, 20 people even, nobody's going to miss me not turning it on. Is that something, obviously communication has to make that happen, the comfort level, but like, how do you get a team over that? Let's see each other. Let's be here. Let's be present.
That's a policy. Really, that's just an expectation of when we're on the call together, you need to have your video on and be ready to participate.
Okay.
So it's communicating that beforehand. And oftentimes we discover that those are the needs, and that's what we're looking for. That's what we expect from our team after something happens. But don't let it continue to happen. Make sure that you're communicating that quickly. And we have the technology to do that.
So organizations right now that aren't communicating, one thing I'm thinking is like, I already don't have enough time to do what I do. Now you're asking me to put this more communication internally on top of my shoulders and make this happen. I already don't have a marketer communicating to my clients, and now you're telling me let's over communicate to my internal staff. How do I get that done?
Automation. So
Okay.
There's plenty of tools where you can set up automation. The upfront, it's going to take upfront time. Okay, so it's going to take time, which is resources, which is money, but that investment pays off long term, especially if you're using automation tools, or once you have templates created and the plan in place, you're going to see it play out, and then your job will get easier. So even though there's an upfront investment, it costs money, maybe some time, you start to see the effect of now you have time for more things. Similar to working from home productivity.
Right.
You can kind of manage that.
Yeah, we have the same thing on the marketing end. Certain triggers make certain things happen down the line. So who executes this? So this program, we're starting to put it together. We're figuring this out. Is this like, I'm thinking small companies. You said less than 100. Down to 12 employees. Who's executing that? The leader of the company, or are they hiring someone in part-time to take care of it? Or organizations, at different sizes? What are you seeing happen at organizations of different sizes might be a better way to frame that.
So typically it's the management team that is going to communicate and take the time to do this. The C-level suites, executives, they have the message, they give it to the management team. They're the ones that articulate it and send it out to everyone, but it's still clear and consistent because we're talking about it. We're having conversations about it, where there's expectations around it. In smaller organizations, it is the owner or CEO that is going to be the one implementing it. And oftentimes they have an assistant or a manager or a second-hand person that really can help implement it into the organization.
Okay. So going to try and wrap all this up, and let's simplify this into next steps. We're currently not communicating, let's say, or we are on some level, but we don't know if it's enough. What is the first thing we need to do?
The first thing we need to do is figure out what initiative or what you're wanting to communicate. So if it's culture, and then survey your team and do an analysis of what's working and what's not working.
Okay. So we have all that data, and what's second?
Second is we formulate a strategy and what that's going to look like. And then third is implementation.
How much time do you think that would take?
Scope of the project definitely determines that. So it can take anywhere from, I'd say, a month to a few years.
Interesting. Okay. I would say those that take a few years, those are larger orgs with much broader scope of project, or
typically one thing runs into another. So we're always problem solving. right? And so we solve a problem, we realize that that now we have this issue, let's solve this problem, and it just will continue until everything is streamlined and solidified.
Gotcha. Understood. So, a lot of iterations. So we're talking about like, so we've got this plan, we're iterating and we're learning along the way. And that's what makes a project last a much longer time period, so that we get to something that's real smooth, that's real polished, that we can prove works. But at a smaller organization, and taking those few weeks, what I'm hearing is taking those few weeks to really understand, what is it that I have to communicate? What am I already communicating or not communicating? And then understanding when and how I'm already doing it or not doing it, and filling those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that now is going to pay in dividends down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Cool.
Absolutely.
So we are in a time period where we don't know when we're going to have a vaccine. Okay. We don't know when it's going to be fully safe to come back to an office in mass. Having these clear communications is really what's going to drive our economy and our businesses forward, especially as many of our team are working from home. So as we kind of wrap up here, what is that last thing that you want to share with people and make sure that they get right or do right now?
You just can't afford to not communicate to your team, and identifying those gaps and ensuring that we have employees for a reason, and they expect to trust us as leaders and as business owners, and it's our job to ensure that we are making them first, because they're our biggest asset, but one of our biggest risks as well. And in this uncertain time, it's really about identifying what needs to happen and what you can do to make them feel comfortable.
Cool. Where can those watching or those who find this later learn more about you, get in touch?
So Chelsie Fall and Associates, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn. You can private message me or on either platform, or Chelsie@chelsiefall.com is my email address.
Awesome. Chelsie, thank you so much for coming and sharing those insights and more about what organizations can do to get their teams aligned and moving forward in this time of COVID. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Have a great day.
You too. So we do this pretty much every week. If you'd like to learn more about our next live conversation, please head over to mypocketmarketing.com/join. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're on Facebook, like our page, get notified for everything going on. Again, really like to thank Chelsie for coming on. And I am going to see you in the next one.